because we publish, beloved. Hello there, Dara Baldwin. How are you?
Great peace and blessings to you and
Oh
everyone
my
listening.
gosh. I am so excited to be here. I have been walking around every bookstore looking at the cover of your book, child. I will not forget. I walked into a bookstore. I was in Oakland visiting home, and it was Pegasus Books, and your book was right in the front. To be a problem, a Black woman's survival in the racist disability rights movement from Beacon Press. Thank you, first of all, thank you for writing it to start off, just to start there. And then second, congratulations. I'm so proud of you to write such a courageous and honest text. And that's what we're here to talk about. So, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to We Publish, beloved.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here, and thank you for your book and your work, and for this podcast. And thank you for you know, sending your positive vibes to my book when you're in a bookstore. And thank you to the Pegasus Bookstore for selling my book
Come
because
on.
that's how we met. I'm shadow banned. A lot of bookstores will not sell my book because of that word racist. They were like, oh, they put us on the back shelves or, and they don't want to do events with us. People who write
Wow.
about racism. And it's interesting now that we're in these times. And
Yes.
now they're like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, you might have had something there when you called these people racist.
Come on. Let's get into this. I want to get into this. This is so important. So first, let's just give me a little bit of a history. How did we get here? When did the book come out? Give us a nice background so we understand how we got to be a problem.
Sure, and I love this because of your podcast. I've been watching and listening for years, and so the advice. So I've been doing, and it's in the book. This is a memoir, so that's what I
Yeah,
learned too. That a memoir is a piece of your life, a section of your life,
that's right.
and not an autobiography. A biography starts with, I was born on this day and I died,
Mhm.
right? So that's that. But you do get a little bit of history of me beforehand. So learning that was interesting. I have always wanted to be a writer. In college, I was an English lit major, so I read a lot and I write a lot. So that's that. But I got into social justice work in as a profession, 2009. But I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, Brick City.
Yes.
So you've been around social justice all my life. I'm a third generation Delta.
Come on,
And
soror.
that's right. So social justice has been in my life and grew up, like I said, Newark. You can't be in Newark and not be political, right? Amir
Mm.
Baraka, right? Rosa Clemente and hip hop, all of that came through
Yeah.
Newark, right? The African Congress and all of that came through Newark, right? Okay, so that's there. But when I got into professionally, I was blessed. People always say, how did you get into disabilities? I say divine intervention. And I was
Mm.
there because I was the only only person of color in this community doing this work. And I talk about it in the book. And I say that to say I was pushed forward to other communities. That's why I do housing and environmental justice and all that, which then led me to meet many authors like Naomi
Mm.
Klein, like Medea Benjamin of Cold Pink, like Michelle Alexander, Maria
Mhm.
J. Pro, like, right? And so they became my friends. And
Mm.
2016, right after 45 won, because I hate to say his name, he was 45
Same.
then. Um, a couple of them said to me, "Where's your book?" And where we were out doing
Mm.
something, and I was like, "Oh, I'm reading such and such," and they were like, "No, where's your book?" And I was like, "Oh."
Yeah.
So they did that, and I said, "That's what you guys do. I write policy. I don't write books." And
Mm.
you can do this. So that's that. And then then I said, okay. And she's formerly known as Eve Ensler, the vagina monologue,
Mhm.
sat me down and gave me some things and prompts and said, here, do just write. Don't worry about editing.
Yes.
Just write. She's like, that's not the process. I said, okay. She went over the process with me and I said, okay. She's an author, right? She's written. All right. And then this is where we need to come in as writers and stuff. I had people who were not gatekeepers. who said, "Where do you wanna publish?" And I
Yeah.
gave him a list and said,
Yeah.
"I would love to have my book published by anyone who knows these people." And if you know Beacon Press, it is a social justice
Yeah.
press. It is under the
Yeah.
Unitarian Church, the nonprofit,
Yeah.
and I knew many authors there. So Andrea Ritchie, she wrote her
Mhm.
wonderful book, Invisible No More,
That's right.
about women and many queer people being harmed by the police. There's a chapter in there around disabilities. I was in it, so she
That's
was
right.
beautiful to me. Charlene Carruthers, right, queer
Yes.
Black sister. She wrote Unapologetics through Beacon.
Yes.
Doc Reverend, Barber wrote his book.
Mhm.
Zach Norris, if you know, from the Ellen Baker Center, he
Yeah.
used to run that. He wrote We Keep Us Safe.
That's right.
So I had Desmond Meade, right, from Florida, who talks about formerly incarcerated folks getting their right to vote, Democracy Restoration Act. I worked with him on that on a federal level. He wrote
Yeah.
both of his books through Beacon, and so they opened the door. And
Yeah.
Beacon was doing a disability section, and I
Wow.
know we're gonna talk about this. They had all white authors.
That's right.
And someone said to them, "What are you doing?" And I have, divine intervention and timing. And they said, "Yes, we'll take," they had the outline and they saw my premise and they said, "We'll take your book." And
Yeah.
that's how I got into it. I know many people send queries and it's really hard and and I want to say to you, keep going.
Yeah.
Don't ever give up. Our time is here, not coming. It is here. It is time to talk about Black people and their issues and to tell the story from our point of view. So I tell
Mhm.
people that. And I'm paying it forward by helping my fellow activists who I know should write a book and doing the same thing, sitting them down and saying, let's do an outline.
Mm.
Let's talk about this. Who
Mm.
do you
I
want
love
to publish? So that's how I
I
got to
love
my book.
that. Ooh, I love
I was
that. Ooh, that makes me so
yeah,
happy.
oh, so yeah, and it came out July 2024. It's
Yeah.
been out. I will let you know my in the publishing world is not a success, meaning it hasn't sold a lot of copies, but that's not why I got into it. In
Mhm.
my world and in what I want to do is a success. I'm on this podcast with you right now.
Mm.
That is a success. Talking to Black women and queer people and people about what this is. But
Mm.
I am very honest in the book, as you said. I
Mm.
name names. I did not
You
hold back.
do. Yes, you
And
did.
those organizations who were called out about their racism have contacted me, have issued public apologies to
Come
me.
on.
I am currently have my own consulting company and they have
Yeah.
booked me and are paying me to
Come
address
on.
their racism. So to me, that is a success. That is
Come on.
right because as I said, we pay it forward. No longer in that community is there only one person of color.
Yeah.
There's about 10, 11 people of color, some Asian folks, some Latina folks, some
Yeah.
Black young people who are doing policy now, and they love it. I said, I don't want what happened to me to happen
Yeah.
to them. You're going to
Yeah.
treat them better. And so
Yeah.
that is happening because of my book. Because I wrote it out and said, right, and you've read it.
Mm.
The other reason I wanted to be at a publishing house is you have to be vetted.
Yes.
Right. What I wrote, um, an example is them not talking about the Olmsted case.
Mhm.
It should be
Mhm.
Olmsted v. Lois Curtis case
Mhm.
because they say they erase Lois
That's right.
Curtis' name because she's a
That's
Black
right.
woman, if you know the case.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I wrote about that, right? And the lawyers, when you get vetted, you can't talk about people. You can't make an accusation and not have, as we call it,
Evidence.
receipts.
That's
And
right.
so I had that. I had all the articles and emails and things of them purposefully only saying Olmsted's name, who he was
Mm.
a white man who wanted to keep
Mhm.
these people in institutions
Mhm.
and purposely not saying Lois Courage. They would say, well, she's not important to the case.
Yikes.
And so you can't write about, like, I couldn't say they said she wasn't important without showing the lawyer an email that says, "See, look, this is what this person said. And look, this is it." So I had the receipts. And I had always known I was gonna write a book. So I was one of those who would print out three-hole punch, and I put it in a three-hole a binder, and I
Come
had all my.
on. Come on.
So I'll say that, right? So I wanted to be vetted. And so this community knew they had done wrong. And so that's why I said my book is a success to me,
Yeah,
because these changes are happening right now.
I love that. Um, we're gonna get into it, because this is a timely book, but also because of the ways that you weave in your experiences with massage noir and the ways that so many voices have been silenced, and you were kind of the one person in the room saying, hey, everybody, this is an intersectional problem, right? This is a concern, and what y'all are doing is erasing people who are affected or who are significant to this conversation. And so I think, you said you've listened to the podcast, that's what this is all about, right? The fact that not only are we often erased from and overlooked in publishing, but it's in every sector. And so I feel like you do such a good job here of making that clear. I was looking at the book and highlighting and writing notes and so what I want to ask you about is that process you detail, from someone saying to you, I want you to write this book, to actually physically finishing the book and saying, okay, it's done. Because there's a lot here, and it was inflected by, as you said, 45, which I do appreciate you actually call him 45 in the book, right? Here you do a genealogy, you talk about the differences in disability activism and care from Clinton to Biden. You walk through Obama, and then we get to this 45 moment. So it seems that there had to be a lot of research that went into writing this. How long did that take?
You are
You are
correct.
correct.
It took me almost 4 years to write this book. And I'll tell you, I love to write. So writing is not an issue for me. A lot of people sit down and write. That doesn't, I am writing right now my first fiction book. And
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you. I'm excited for that. It's a swooping family saga. I'll say that. That's what my
yes,
editor says to say. And so anyway,
yeah,
I have a goal of being finished by June 1st. And
yeah.
every day I sit down, I write 2 hours a day, right?
Mm,
I'm a morning person, so and I do that, but whatever, and sometimes longer on the weekends, like a Sunday, I'm like, "Oh, I got some time, so I could do it." So I'll say that. You do have to be, diligent about your writing.
mm,
That, to me, not everyone, but for me to get a project done, I have to write every day. Like that's
yeah,
my 90 day. I'm saying, okay, here we go. And this is 90 days after almost 10 years of this nonfiction. Like I've had this fiction book
yeah,
in the pocket, as they say. Okay.
yeah,
But for this book, as I said, wonderful from the Vagina Monologue, she gave me a space. I had a retreat kind of space. We sat
yeah,
and we talked, and she told me, as she writes, she said, "Just write and then worry about editing later." So that was a
yeah,
good thing for me. Beacon was very kind because I was very, not afraid, but, like, uncertain. I had never written a book.
yeah,
So they
yeah.
gave me what's called a writing doctor. If you need
Wow.
one, you can ask your publisher. Yes, they're called writing doctors, and
Yeah,
mine is wonderful if you all wanna work with him. He's a great, genius, and what he did was he guided me, like I said, memoir. He taught me what that was. I didn't know what a memoir, I didn't know that.
mm,
Like, he was like, "This is just a piece of your life." So he did that. He guided me and said, "Okay, the first part of the book should be this. Let's talk about your life." And so I would
mm,
write, and then I would send him pages, and he would say, "That's a little too much. Oh, this is great here." Like, the story about my mother being in the
mhm,
union, and that's how I
mhm,
got to activism. He said, "Yes,
mhm,
this is what people need to know about your life." So he did that. So we would write. Um, So it is a very, especially nonfiction. If you're writing
Mhm,
nonfiction, as I said, you can't write and not have receipts. And so that's the
mhm.
hard part. So I was writing the stories, and then I had to fill in the receipts and fill in, as you
Yeah,
said, the research and the
yeah,
resources that came
yeah,
from. So I did that. At the beginning of my book, hopefully you can get my book out there. Most
yeah.
people skip over introductions.
No, it's
Please,
so good.
thank you. Will,
Oh,
that was Will. That was my right. He was like, "We're gonna do a great introduction for this." I
come
said, "Okay."
on. It's
So
so
one,
good.
thank you. One in my introduction was explaining to be a problem, and the title and where it
That's
comes
right.
from W.E. Du
Read the voice.
Bois
That's
and
right.
his Souls of Black Folks.
That's
And
right.
that he went to the South and decided to speak to people about race and to speak to
Yeah,
those who needed to hear it, white folks, right?
yeah,
And when he did it, they would come to him and say, "How does it feel to be a problem? You are a problem because you're bringing up this stuff." And so he wrote these essays while he was doing that. And those essays turned into Souls of Black Folks, the book.
yeah.
So when I was in those rooms, just as we were just talking about, and I would continue to bring up, and not only, like you said, I would bring up issues about LGBTQ folks, because I'm a
Mhm,
comrade. I was like,
mhm,
but wait a minute, this affects, the LGBTQ folks and xenophobia. They are very xenophobic. They don't care
mhm,
about immigrants. They don't care about formerly incarcerated folks, like,
mm-mm,
right? And so they would say, she's a problem. You're a problem. You're
mm.
a problem. And I write about it. I had a boss every Thursday morning. They called him and said, "Can you do something with her? Can she not bring up race? Can she not bring up the queer folks? Can she not bring up formerly incarcerated? We don't care about those people."
Mhm.
So I journal and I put to be a problem. And I said, so that is explained in the introduction.
Yeah,
But I also do, as you said, so you understand when I talk about something in chapter 4, it goes back to the introduction, so you know how that comes, right?
yeah.
And then finally, I wanted a glossary.
Yes.
Um, and that came from a wonderful, again, Charlene Carruthers, our
Come on,
wonderful.
Charlene.
So if you don't
Yes,
know Charlene, you should
yes.
know her. She's right now working on her PhD, so
That's
soon we'll be
right.
getting
That's
her.
right.
I love her. And in her book, Unapologetic, she discusses Black queerism. She's also one of the founders of BYP 100, if you
That's
don't know,
right.
in Chicago, that area. She's from there. But she has a glossary in the front of her book, and I
She does.
loved it. So I'm an avid reader. I read her book immediately, got a signed by her and everything. But I said, "Oh, I want to do what Charlene did there, discussing queer, right? What it meant to be a queer Black person." And she discussed what it meant
Yeah,
to be a radical. Those are some of
yeah,
the words she used. And he loved it, Will. So he set it up for me. He was like, "Okay, you use these words a lot in the book. Let's explain them." One of them was misogynoir, which most people don't know the history of misogynoir, where it came from, why we use it. So I put it, that's one of the words I define.
yeah.
Another one, pro-Black.
That's
A lot of
right.
people use pro-Black all the time, but they don't understand. And even these quote unquote liberal white folks. And so I wrote it and said, listen, to be pro-Black is a lot more than just saying it and centering Black folks. It is a lot more than anti-racism, right? You can be anti-racist, but you got to be anti-racist and center Black people and our issues,
Mhm,
specifically Black disabled people. And so I
mhm,
wrote that definition. And then the last one is New World Order. I use that a lot.
mhm.
And my Beacon editor said, "Can you explain that? Because most people see that as a conspiracy theory." And I was like,
Yeah,
"Oh, yeah, okay, let me explain it in the Blackism."
yeah, yeah.
Explain that in order to remove these systems of oppression, white people cannot lead this movement.
No,
And
they
they need
cannot.
to get out of the way, and they need to let Black, brown, and indigenous folks lead. And they can be there. I don't doesn't mean they can't be at the table. You just can't lead this work. We see this
Right,
now and what is happening.
right.
And so that process is what I did.
Uh,
Now the last thing I'll tell you, so people know about the publishing process. You
yeah.
may write your book, like you said, when you knew it was the end. We sent it in and it wasn't the end because
Mm,
then your editors at the publishing house have to edit. And
Mhm.
what I'm saying, I know I'm being taped, and even Beacon and I had this conversation.
Yeah.
It was hell. It was torture to
Yeah.
me because it was constantly editing and editing and editing. And that editing process almost went for 18 months. And
Wow.
it was my good friends, my writer friends, like Michelle Alexander, right,
Yeah.
who wrote in Jim Crow, and again V and Naomi Klein and Andrea Ritchie, who said, "Where the heck is your book? Why are we still editing? What is going on?" And I was like, "I don't know. Is this?" They said, "No, this is not normal. 18, like, what are
Mhm.
they doing over there?" And so I unfortunately in publishing, you got all white women.
Yeah.
There were no black people. There's still no black editors at Beacon,
Yeah.
right? And so I had to explain constantly situations that these white women would never understand.
Mm.
And so that was a very difficult part of the process. I won't lie
Mm.
to you. Like, you need to know this, that, and they are the gatekeepers. Your
They
book will
are.
not get published until they say yes,
That's
right?
right.
The vetting process, like I said, the accusations and having the proof. They were constantly, "Well, are you sure about this?" And I'm like, "Here, it's in writing. Like, what are you talking about?" Okay. So that's that. And then a lot of people don't know, also in the publishing world, the big publishing world, books are published over in China,
That's right.
and there's only 2 seasons that they cut the paper to publish the books.
Mm.
And I know this because, again, I asked. I'm like, "Well, how does this work?" And because they were like, "You need to get this book in by this date, October, or in the spring, I think it's April, because that's when they cut the paper. They won't
Wow.
cut it any other time. And if you don't get your book in, then you have to wait till the next season." Right?
Wow.
So that's one. Two is Beacon is an imprint of Penguin, right?
Mhm.
Which Penguin everyone knows Penguin Press, right? Which is a larger press, which means that, yes, Beacon is in charge and they say, "Yeah, we're going to print this book," but then everyone has someone who's in charge of them,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
So they have what's called a marketing day to Penguin, and they sit down and they tell Penguin, "These are the books we're going to print this year."
Mm.
And Penguin looks and says yes or no.
Yeah.
So that was another process I had to sit and wait to get and say, "Oh my gosh, okay, yeah, you got a signed contract now. You got all this stuff."
Mhm.
But these are right? So I want people to understand why it took me almost 4 years to get
Yeah.
this book out. And I am not, quote unquote, a famous author as the ones I just mentioned. I'm not Naomi Klein. I'm not Medea Bencher. I'm not Michelle Alexander. So I'm not throwing books out, right? And they know you're a bestseller. They're taking a chance on me. So,
Yeah.
right, I'm not that person that they're gonna look and say, "Oh, I see Charlene Carruthers. Yep, she wrote. Okay, yeah, take her."
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't have that visibility as other people. I'm not saying I'm not on their level because I won't say that, right? I
Come
know
on
what I
now.
am, right?
Come on
But
now.
I'm not, Oprah is not saying, "Oh, read
Yeah.
this book." Right? That's
Yeah.
not me, right? Okay. So they were taking a chance with me. So being on that list to Penguin's like, "Who is
Yeah.
this chick?" Right? What
Yeah.
is she? What is that? But I think I got through because I was writing about a subject area that was coming up, right? It was after
Yeah.
the COVID, people were talking about disabilities. So again, right, the perfect storm. They were like, "Yeah, we want a book like this because it's about disabilities and it's from a black disabled, I'm not disabled, but black author who
Yeah.
knows the community." So that's
Yeah.
how I got there. So I just want people to know, like, there's these processes, right? And then that's how my book came to fruition. Like, you have a lot
Yeah.
of people who sit and look at your book, read your book, and right, and then you get the galley, which is the
Yeah.
draft, and you
Yeah.
get that. But yeah, it's a process. And if you get my book, you'll see on the back, I have
Yeah.
all of the people
Yeah, you roll
mentioned.
deep.
Khalid
Yeah.
Beydoun is one of my good
Yeah.
friends. Suni Shantari, who's a wonderful South Asian poet. Stacey Ann Chin is one of my dear friends, author friends. Dave Zirin is one of my really good
Yeah.
authors. They wrote quotes. So then you get those together. That's a process, right? Them reading the book and them telling you what they thought. So there's a lot that goes into it. Thank you
Yeah.
for bringing that up.
Yeah.
And you have to have thick skin, and courage to
Yes, you
put
do.
yourself out there.
Yes, you do.
And then the last process, which I'm on now and I'm still on, and it's quite interesting, is the marketing process. Um,
Yes.
I got a lot of pushback. As I said, a lot of bookstores told me no.
Mm,
Black bookstores told me, "No,
mm.
we won't do an event with you. We won't sell your book." But I got a lot of yeses, right? Which is good. I was a featured author for the March On Festival, which happens in DC.
Mhm.
Thank you to Issa, I love you. Issa Bay, who runs the March On, which is a wonderful festival in DC. If you don't know, it's an arts festival around all the arts, film, visual arts and authors. And so I was
Yeah.
a featured author there. And being from DC, my DC Public Library, thank you to my
Yeah.
Raymond and the crew. They featured me for disability in July when the book came out. The ADA was signed in July, so that's kind of
Yes.
the disability anniversary. They featured my book, and I was there, and we gave away 25. The library bought 25 books and gave them away, and I signed them, right? Which is wonderful for the communities. Thank you to my sorority. We as Delta, about 10 years ago, they created what is called Delta Authors.
Mm.
And there's a book, right, that you are highlighted in. So I'm in the 2026 Delta Authors book.
Yeah.
It's a process, right? And you just have to keep pushing and you have to keep doing. And then of course being on a podcast like
Yeah.
yours, like you
Yeah. I
has done
love
it.
that. I mean, I think I'm hearing so much about what you're saying, in the writing process and the editing process where you really had to fight for your work and your
Oh, for
voice.
every word.
Yes, and I can tell that, right? So I when I read the introduction, I was floored because you are so clear, like describing trauma and vulnerability and what lived experience, right? These are things that are what some people will call woo woo, right? Trauma, vulnerability, that these things don't matter, that it doesn't matter how we feel, right? And how the somatic experience of being Black in America is so often overlooked. And so to start out from the beginning and to carry those things through to say, actually, lived experience is exactly what makes Black, brown, and indigenous folks, queer folks experts on this issue, right? So I also heard just now, and we're gonna get into it, you talking about how there was some Black bookstores that were like, we're not doing it. So I want, so first, okay, before we get into that, I want to know, did you do this process with an agent? How did you introduce yourself? I know you had connections. Was there an agent that came in during okay, tell me about that.
Sure, yeah, no, I have no agent. Everyone asked that, and I was very again, I had these people, I said, "What does an agent do?" I'm very much that I'm an analyst, right? I
Yeah,
am an analyst at heart, so Imma ask these questions. And everything they said the agent does, I was doing. I said, "I already did all of that, so I don't
yeah,
understand." Okay, no, and I'm very organized, so I pulled up an Excel spreadsheet.
yeah,
I used to be in finance, so I'm always in Excel.
yeah.
And went through there's a list of Black bookstores. You Google Black and it comes up and it gives you the state or the territory, DC, and it lists. And so I
Mhm,
said, okay. And I exported and imported into my spreadsheet. And again, talking to my friends, I was like, how do you set up a book event? And they said, oh, you talk
mhm,
to the event coordinator at the bookstore. And I emailed and called, because now you can call. They do have phones work, right? Some
absolutely,
people don't. But
absolutely.
I emailed most bookstores. If you go to their website, they'll have a contact us and you hit it and it gives you know that little spreadsheet that you
The
fill in your
form.
name and all that. I
Mhm,
did that. That usually goes to the bookstore's manager,
mhm,
right? And then they'll also have an events coordinator. Some will say events person at the bookstore, or it'll
mhm,
say the actual person's name, Jane
mhm,
Doe at the
mhm,
bookstore. And I
mhm,
did that. I emailed both of them. And I wouldn't hear back, or they would literally say, no, thank you. We're not interested in
mhm,
this. or this is too. I actually had people who said to me, "This is too controversial for our bookstore. We don't really want to get involved in this." Also, I got, "You're not really known. You're not going to bring in." Yep, I was told that. Well, nobody really knows you. Nobody really talks about disability, so this isn't an issue that we want to talk about here. Okay. I also am blessed that I work up and down the East Coast. As I speak to you now, I'm in New Jersey doing some work. So, and I'm from here. So I would come to New York or New Jersey, and I came to New York and I went to every Black bookstore in New York area, which are lit
Mm,
bookstore, right? And
see,
over in
yeah.
Bronx and the Brooklyn, they were like, "No, thank you." And
Mm,
yeah, I went over to Brooklyn to the bookstore. They were like, "No, thank you." And so I said, "Okay." Harlem bookstores, no thank you. And so I went, on foot, right? Walked and stuff, did that. I love to say, Harriet's bookstore in
yes,
Philly. She's
Billy,
great. She's just been so busy. She was like, "Hold on, we're gonna get you in." I love it. And
incredible.
I understand, like, she's done stuff in Paris, right? She has her wonderful bookstore over there,
Janine,
The
yeah,
Baker bookstore. So,
yeah,
Josephine Baker bookstore. So, she and I are talking, like, right, like, she replied, and I understand you're busy. Let's figure out when we can do it. At least if someone contacts you back, it's
yeah,
good. But that's how I do it. I do it now. I'm still every day. Again, I have I do 5 contacts a day and say, "Hey,
uh,
let me see what can happen." That's the other
mhm,
thing. Comes out of your own pocket. Like, Beacon does not
mhm,
pay for any of this, so you understand and know. The only part that Beacon will do is make sure the books get sent to the bookstore because they wanna sell their
mhm,
books.
mhm,
And they do give me, like, I have bookmarks,
yeah,
postcards, they'll do that. They'll do some marketing, but that's it. They're not paying for anything for you. I'm not,
yeah,
right, their big author.
yeah,
So I've done a lot of work around that in LA. So I have a crew in LA who's been asking. So I was like, "Okay, I'll be on the West Coast. I'll go down there. And then I'm gonna go over to Texas because I have some friends in Houston and
mm,
Dallas who've been asking the same thing." But those are my friends who are
yeah,
putting something together. It's not the bookstores.
yeah,
These are groups and organizations, which is another way to sell your book, right?
yeah,
I'm going to be with some organizations that I've worked with for years who said, "Come, Dara, we want to honor you and we want to sell your book." But it
yeah,
has not, right? That's the process that, as we always do, as Black women do, we have to find our own way, right, to make the cake. I
that's
gotta get
right, that's
ingredients.
right,
So when you ask, no, I don't have and even when I talk to my friends who have agents, they tell me, "Oh, they don't do that." I was like, "This is how." They're like, "How did you get on the March On thing?"
yeah,
I went to March On, right? Every
yeah,
year I would go. And they knew me, and I said, I'm writing a book, it's coming out." And Issa and them said, "Oh, you and to promote a DC author. You can't come to DC
mhm,
and do a festival event and not significantly show
yeah,
DC artists."
yeah,
And they believed in that. They said, "No, we want to give a DC Black woman writer a chance." So
I
they
love
did.
it,
Right. So you have to push yourself. No, I have no agent. Even my fiction book, I'm doing on my own. I'm lucky
mhm,
Beacon does do fiction. So I don't have a publisher yet, but I'm just going on faith and saying this is gonna happen. But
yeah,
if you plan to write a book, first of all, do it. Don't let nobody stop you. And
mhm,
second of all, understand and know it's yours. That's your
yeah,
baby. And you have to take care of that baby. They will not, unless you, like I said, unless you are these big artists, right? Again, I'm not a New York Times seller. All
yeah,
my friends are like, "You're gonna be a best times." They don't understand the process.
no, they don't,
Um, it is very difficult. You have to sell 5,000 books in 1 week
yeah,
to be hit to get even on the bottom of the New York Times sellers list. And let me tell you, that is a lot of people don't
a
understand
lot of
5,000.
books,
That's a lot of books in 1 week, right? And it can't
mhm,
be to the same place because they do follow that. Like if
mhm,
your wonderful organization you love purchases 1,000 books, those 1,000 books don't count
mm,
towards the 5,000, right? It's a counted thing. Um, you have to, like, Goodreads, all these people
mhm,
who they have these white women who, if they don't support you and they're not talking about you, New York Times doesn't look at you, right? Like
That's right.
there's all these processes behind the scenes that I've learned. People
That's
like
right.
I didn't notice. I learned this along the way. As I told
That's
you,
right.
I'm an investigative reporter. I'm like, now how does that happen?
Yeah.
Why can't so how come?
Yes.
And so, right, it's not rigged, but it is rigged.
It
It's
yeah.
not right, it's not set for new authors like us who are out here, who nobody really knows our work as far as the law, right? I'm not on TV, I'm not on CNN every
Mhm.
Sunday or Saturday, I'm not on Roland Martin, right? Love all
Mhm.
these shows. Um, they don't have us to talk on and they're so bookstores and people, they'll tell you you're not gonna bring in a crowd, but I know I'll bring in a crowd because I'm in the communities.
Mm.
And I travel and I'm in the communities, right? It's
I
also why,
love
and I
it.
write about this in the book, I knew that 45 was gonna win.
Yes, you did.
The 2 years before his election, I was on a project around transportation, and I traveled to those kinds of cities, the middle of the country, Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio, um, New Mexico, all around the South. I was in that area, Texas, and that's
Mm.
all I was seeing, especially in Ohio, right? And I was like, "This is crazy." I
Mhm.
was in Kentucky, right, for a long time, Louisville, Kentucky, and all down in that area, working on this project around ending pretextual stops, as well as some other things.
Yeah.
Um, and he won, and it was interesting in DC to see people lose their moms. Like, they were like, "Wait," because we came from, remember, 8 years of Obama, of
Mhm.
a city who was working with a administration where we were in and out of the White House. We were, you might agree or disagree, we were making some changes. We were
Yeah,
doing some.
diplomacy. Yeah.
That's right, it was diplomacy. Might not been everything you wanted, right? But we were having those conversations at the White House.
Yeah.
We were having those conversations in Congress, right? We
Yeah.
had people like Yvette Clarke, Representative Yvette Clarke, again,
Yeah.
Soror, Democrat from Brooklyn, right? Along with Bonnie Watson Coleman, Democrat from New Jersey, love her too. They started, right, the Black Women's Caucus with Ayanna Pressley, Democrat from Massachusetts,
Mhm.
right? Remember, they were all coming in at this time, and we were, oh my God, making change, right? Cori Bush, and then we're coming in
Yeah.
Congress. They weren't there then, right? These eight
That's right.
years of laying the foundation to bring in radical social justice people like a Jasmine Crockett, right? And so that's why and I talk about that in the book. I do talk a lot
Mhm.
about the DC and how DC handles things.
Mhm.
And being honest in my book, which thank you for saying that, people look at me. I have been blackballed. I have been,
Mm.
people shadow ban me. I'm no longer allowed to, I was actually told that I couldn't come to this conference, and then the people stood up and said, absolutely not. I let people know, they're like, why aren't you at the conference? I said, I was told never to come back again
Mm-mm.
by the leadership. Yes. And so, as I told you, they issued a public apology to me. I write about it in the book, but people don't understand that truth tellers are the ones they don't
That's right.
want to see.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I appreciate you for being honest about that because one of the things we don't talk about enough is when you are the first or the only or the black woman in the room or the problem, right? How folks will work so hard to erase, silence, eradicate, diminish everything that you are saying rather than understanding that listening moves us all forward, right? And I think that's something that in your book and in this moment, so let's talk about this moment, right? This episode may not air in close proximity to what happened at the BAFTAs in late February. Um, However, I think that that particular experience that we have all now collectively shared says so much and is so articulative of what is in your book, right? So this moment where, you know, uh I'm not going to rehash the whole things. I just don't want to. Where there's now questions, folks are trying to understand a disability that they have no proximity to, that they are not in community with the people who have it or with other Black disabled people, but feel so comfortable talking about it, feel so comfortable offering solutions and suggesting new ways in and through it. And so I feel, that was another tension I found in your book, specifically when you're talking about the conflictedness of the DC Beltway, where there's the public facing policy in, and then there's the back door behind the scenes actuality, and that those things don't always match. So how I guess I'm wondering, how did you find a way to write about those experiences? Because they are disheartening. It's clear as you're talking about this because you have a deep personal connection to this. You talk about your mother, you talk about your family, you talk about witnessing folks with disabilities and how that shifted your orientation toward this. So how did you find the place where you could write about holding that complexity? Because it doesn't feel good.
It doesn't. You are correct. My sister, to you, to people, to my Black and brown family who have disabilities. And I say them, and I don't, as I tell people, I am not a disabled person yet. Because if you live by the grace of God, I live long enough, you will
Mhm,
have a disability, right? It will
mhm.
happen in your life. And so I understand and know that. And I have always come into spaces where I am not the lived experience. And when I write about the definition of lived experience, what it means to be a comrade, not an ally, not a friend.
Come
Many know what
on.
comrade is too.
Yes.
And so I say the same thing as, I'm not an immigrant to this country. I am not formally incarcerated, and I am not LGBTQ. I am not queer, but I work in those communities. And if you talk to the people who I work with, they will tell you. And I laugh because I was at Creating Change,
Yeah.
wonderful National LGBTQ Task Force had their conference this January.
Yes.
Every 4 years, they come to DC, and it was in DC, and I help out with Advocacy Day, and a young lady said to me, because I was talking about something, and she said, "Oh, I thought you were lesbian." I said, "Oh, I'm not." And it's not like, "Oh, it's bad," but because I
Yeah.
was talking about, relationships and it's guy, and she was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Whatever." But I laughed because she didn't even know that I fit in so well that
Yeah.
you don't know, right? That's how you're supposed to do it, but,
That's right.
not saying I'm great at it either, but when you ask that, the book talks a lot about the bad stuff. I want people to write. There's about 4 chapters, but there is one chapter 5. And again, thank you to
Mhm.
Will, my writing doctor, who said to me, "You can't write just about the bad. You have to give
Mm,
solutions and recommendations." And that's what chapter 5 is. And I didn't want to
mhm.
do that because I'm not a Black disabled person. I was like, I can't
Mm,
do that. He said, "Yes, you can." And he helped me. And my wonderful brother, Keith Jones, who wrote the like a wonderful primary to this introduction to this for me. He was a wonderful Keith Jones, who's a wonderful Black disabled activist, and is my guiding light, my guiding star, along with Anita
mm,
Cameron. If you don't know these
mm,
people, Anita Cameron is a wonderful, right? Carrie Gray.
mm.
I sat and talked with them, and by Lisa Thompson, who created the hashtag disability
Yeah.
two white TOOY,
Yeah.
and different Black disabled activist, Imani, right, and said, "What is it you want? What is happening here?" And right, like an interview. And I
Yeah.
wrote those recommendations from their space, right, with
Yeah.
some of mine things that I know about policy sprinkled in there.
Yeah.
So that's how I wrote that, and I explained that in the introduction, that when
Yeah.
I'm writing about what Black disabled people want, this comes from a loving, caring space of someone who has sat over years and in
Yeah.
different spaces, right? Sometimes at a conference,
Yeah.
sometimes at some meetings we had to do, sometimes over a meal, sometimes after a church event, after a spiritual event. I went to the mosque and then I sat with some people, right? Actually sitting and listening and saying, "Oh, okay, this is how we can do this, that we need to center Black and brown folks." And
Yeah.
I want people to know too that it is harmful to know and recognize that it is not only white organizations who have been leaving this community out, but it's all of them, right? It is
Yeah.
even uh, groups who work around immigration, right? For years, they did not want to talk about this. And I was like, let me be clear to you, the treacherous route that you all take to get here, you now have a disability, whether it be
That's right.
PTSD or they've lost a limb, right? The
That's
things
right.
that I've heard from immigrants
That's
coming
right.
here. And that's all immigrants, black, brown,
That's right.
indigenous folks who leave their right, leave indigenous Australia to come here, right? Like all
That's
those kinds
right.
of folks. Something happened to them on their route here. And
That's
so
right.
they have a disability. And disabled children, right? Um, People don't wanna talk about that, and right, I really Silky Shaw, who I love, she's a wonderful activist, she wrote a wonderful book about abolitionism in immigration. They took a long time for the immigration community to understand, "You need to abolish ICE, like, you need to get rid of this." That
Yeah.
came from Black and brown disabled people letting you know, right, like, when you put people in detention centers, do you think they come out the same way?
Come
No,
on.
and they come out with disability, some type of disability. And also immigration community didn't understand the ADA, the Americans with
Yeah.
Disabilities Act, which is our Civil Rights Act, which
That's
is the
right.
floor. Let me be clear to y'all.
That's
It needs to be
right.
changed, but we can't do that in this
That's
Congress.
right.
It protects anyone on US soil. Yes, it says and these horrible racist Republicans will say, but it says the Americans with disability. And I'm like, yeah, but we have Supreme Court cases. We
That's
literally
how it
have, right?
works.
Who have
Yes.
said,
That's right.
no, the ADA covers anybody on our soil.
Walking around on this earth. Yes, that's
Walking
right.
around, right, just rolling and walking, right, they here. And so,
Present.
so
That's
does
right.
all it's right, so does the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disability Education Act, right? So those children you have in those places are to be educated. You do not have the right, that's faith, right? That's federal law. Like all children in the United States have the right to education, right? Brown versus the board of what Brown versus the Board of Education. We have all these Supreme Court cases that you need to educate these children, right? So that's that group, right? So it's all these groups, I hate to say, right? NAACP and large Black organizations that have left Black disabled people out. And we've had these
It's true.
conversations. It
It's
is right.
true.
You have events that are not accessible, that don't have
That's
ASL,
true.
don't have ramps, right? So if you are gonna honor somebody with a disability, they can get on that stage, right? Like let's
That's
just have
true.
these conversations. And so I have that in the book. And I want people to know, like I said, I've worked in this area in this field in many different spaces. I will say reproductive justice space has been one of the most influential and most accepting spaces. Other spaces are coming along, and thank you for that. But we also have to come out of a rights model.
Yeah.
Like that's why we created disability justice, right? The
Yes.
rights model centers white folks.
Yeah.
And every movement has done this, except for environmental justice was around way before white folks was doing climate justice. But all the other movements have created justice. As I just said, reproductive justice movement over 35 years ago, right, created 8 tenets, 8 principles, had to remove Black women, got to get queer Black women, queer
Mm,
and straight and heterosexual women got together and said, the abortion movement is wrong, right? And
that's
this
right.
is about more than abortion, right? And
That's
we
right.
went right and created reproductive justice. And they are two distinctive, different movements, right? Well, that's what happened in disability justice. Disability justice came because the rights movement could not get it together. 35 years and still couldn't get it together.
Mm,
And so they created disability justice, which
mm,
has 10 tenets. First is intersectionality. The last is collective liberation. So, right, housing
mm,
justice. Now you see that, right? About 8 or 9 housing activists got together and said, we can't do housing rights anymore. We have to do housing
mm.
justice. Transportation, we did that, right? In transportation justice. Justice movements are those that include pro-Black, anti-racism at the center of their work, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where that comes from. And that's how I wrote about it in the book to explain to people. And when people say, oh, aren't they the same thing? Disability rights is the same thing as disability justice. And I'm like, you wouldn't do that with reproductive justice.
Come on.
We all know that reproductive justice talked about pregnancy and if you didn't want to be pregnant, talked about the
That's
health
right.
care of your body, talked about the health care of your children and your child, talked about, right, not just abortion, talked about all of the things that went with your life, making sure that you had care wherever you went, right? And like and the care of the whole body, of the whole
Mhm.
entire system of a person. And reproductive justice also included queer trans women, where the abortion community does not do that,
That's
right? They
right.
always say women can get pregnant. That doesn't
That's
happen in
right.
reproductive justice.
That's
So
right.
that's the same with disability justice. There is a difference in the movement and the work of disability justice folks. than there is in the disability rights
That's
movement.
right.
I just also wanted to say this about the BAFTAs. You are
Yeah.
correct. What happened was wrong, in many different ways, and I'm sure we can have more conversations about it. But what has to happen, and it's in my book, is that you can be both. You can be ableist,
Yes.
and even ableism includes racism, and you can be both
Yes.
at the same time. And what happened there, I mostly blame on the production team. Her name is
That's right.
Hillary Rosin. People need to call that woman out because the BAFTAs is live to tape, and
That's
she
right.
chose to edit out offenses against Palestine, because
That's
she's a
right.
Jewish woman who right, who said it. She said this, I'm not making she said this, and she chose to edit out some homophobic things that were said, but she chose to keep in that N word, and
Oh.
that is what needs to be really, really needs to be addressed about BAFTAs and what happened there and your production team, and then how you did not handle the aftermath. There was not a
Mm.
real apology. Alan Cummings did not discuss the harm of the word, the N word. Don't right. This is you are trying to deflect from you as a production team that you don't get to put out in the world a word that is harm. So not only were Delroy and Michael offended as Black men, but all the Black people who watched it on all whatever screen it was on, whether it's a camera, whether it was TV or their computer, were harmed by that word. And you, BAFTA, chose not to address it. That is what needs to be discussed. The other part of Robinson being, his Tourette and all of that, those are side conversations that need to happen. But at the forefront of this is the media and the fact that a media organization condoned having that word be broadcast, condoned having that word not be addressed, and not apologizing to the millions of people who were offended. That is the key of BAFTA.
I agree. I agree, and I could not agree more. I could not agree more, and I appreciate you for that mic drop because this is why I want people to read this book to be a problem. I wish we could talk forever. As a disabled person, I'm just so grateful for this book because there's so few places, and we were talking about this before this recording started, but there's so many few places where I feel seen as a person at all of my intersections, right? And so I appreciate you for being honest about how often we are shut down and pushed out of the conversation, even in those spaces that are supposedly meant for us. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to ask, this is the end of the interview. We are wrapping up. This is I sadly I feel sad that it's over. But where can we find more of your work? Where can we find you? Where can folks get in tapped in with the work that you're doing?
Sure, thank you. You can find me on all social media handles at NJDC07. So New Jersey to DC07. That's me. I was
Come
from New
on.
Jersey. I moved to DC07. I'm on Threads. I'm on Instagram. I'm still on X because I have to be. There are things that I have to follow, so I'm on there. But you can find me there. I don't have a website, but I'm getting stuff set up. I'm
Yes.
actually in conversation now about a possible podcast. We'll
Come
see.
on.
People like, "No, we need to hear this." So I'm doing that. I'm writing on Substack. That will start next month. April 1st will be mine there. I'll be on Substack writing. But you can find me there. And then I always post whatever podcasts and things that I do there.
I wanna say thank you for your honesty and your courage. And people think that courage is just doing something hard. No, courage is doing something hard when the stakes are high. When you can lose your job, when you can be blackballed, when you can be misread and misunderstood. That's real courage. And I appreciate you, Dara, for the courage of, writing this book for us. And we published, beloved. You did it. I'm proud of you. I'm grateful for you.